Where am I going? I don't know. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So yes, here we have the Nasty Hog Rebel Chop Fender and Saddlebag kit. I did have this all custom painted. You know, I contemplated on buying a 2024 and I said, you know what, forget that. I want to get this one custom painted and just do something different with it. Reached out to Ricky HD, he hooked it up. I let him run with it and he did an amazing job. All right, so what comes in the kit? Obviously, you get your chopped rear fender. This is ABS plastic, very lightweight compared to steel. I'll do some weight comparisons later on in the video and show you exactly what the difference is between those two. But very well made, very well constructed, and lightweight. Now it does include a license plate holder. What I like about what Nasty Hog didn't do is already have pre-drilled holes. That way it gives you an option if you want to add this or not, or if you have a different mounting location that you want to add this on. I like that they didn't already have pre-drill holes that you have to fill and then get it painted. I like that they just left it slick and gave you the option if you want to add this or not. It does include the mounting hardware as well as the LED light. I don't know if I'm going with this just yet. I do have some other options I'm looking at, so we'll see if I add this or not. Now what's great about this chop rear fender being ABS plastic, you can modify this as well if you want to make it even shorter than it already is. I've seen that done before, but I like just the way it is. Gave me an option to add the design right there on the back. Also in the kit, you do receive new seat retention hardware. That stock hardware on the rear fender is not going to work with the new setup. It includes your left and right saddlebags. Love the way these look on the side and on the back. Obviously going with that chop look really matches up with this rear fender. Now you do have the option to add lids. They do have a variety of lids. Let's say you have speakers, you wanted to add some speakers, but you don't have to add the lids. These do work with 2014s and up touring models. Let's say you order these bags OEM painted. You can just swap out your lids, put those onto these bags. Now I did receive some lids from Nasty Hog. These came prime, ready to paint. I'm not going with these lids. I did choose to go with another set of lids. I'll show you that in another video. But I will show you how to install these and get that hardware swapped out if you are ordering a set of lids. It includes the two FXR style side covers. Really like the way those look. Really completes the whole look on this kit, giving it that performance bagger look. Now another option you can add is some rear lighting. They do have the rear filler panel lights. You can add those onto the back because when you do take that rear fender off, you will have those gaps or that hole that's on the back right there. You can easily just take these lights, plug those right into there. It includes a wiring harness and everything you need to get it installed. Now another thing that really stood out about Nasty Hog is the way they ship these out. All the way from the box to the packaging on the inside. For me, this is an A+, the way they have these shipped out. Now for this video, I'm only going to be installing the rear fender. This would be a very, very long video if I try to do all of this at once. So if this is a weekend project for you, just wait until I release the saddlebag video. That way you can knock it all out at once. So what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and get all this off so I can access that rear fender, get that off and get it swapped out with this new one. Let's go. All right, so for tools, I did use a couple size ratchets, couple size extensions, a 3/4 inch wrench, an 11/16 wrench, a T40 T-handle, T45 T-handle, a picking tool, a flathead screwdriver, zip tie cutters along with zip ties, a 3/4 inch socket, a 17mm socket, a 9/16, 1/2 inch, 7/16, and 3/8 sockets, a T40 Torx bit along with a T40 Stubby Torx bit, and a T45 Torx bit. All right, so to get this started, I'm gonna remove the seat, the right and left saddlebag, and the left and right side covers. So what I wanna do now is disconnect this tri-bar. You do have your tri-bar on this side, and then you have your rear taillight on this side. It's covered up by this plastic piece. It's held on by 2 tabs. You can use a plastic prying tool, but you can just easily pop it off with your fingers. You just wanna pop this cover off, and then it pops off just like that. So here is where your rear taillight would be. Now, because I do have this 0 latitude taillight, I do have this plugged up. That wiring is ran straight to the front, but this is where you would disconnect your rear taillight. So on this side, you have your tri-bar, you have a tab on the bottom and a tab on the top. I'll use a picking tool to pry those open and disconnect that. Now, in order to remove the rear fender, you do have to remove your fender extension. You have some screws on the side, and then you have some connectors on the back. You have to remove that first in order to remove your rear fender. So now I'll remove this nut right here. This clamps down on your bracket and your fender extension. For this nut, I'm using a 7/16 socket. I'll go ahead and remove this wire retention clip. Now to remove this fender extension, you do have 3 nuts on each side right in here. Now you can't really see it on this side because I do have some wiring, but you have 3 nuts on this side as well. And to remove these nuts, I'm using a 7/16 socket with an extension. So you have your tri-bar wire right here. You can pop those out, it's just held in by some clips. So any wiring you have zip tied along your fender, you wanna go ahead and cut those zip ties and remove that wiring. Now that I have this all disconnected, I can go ahead and slide this out. Now, you don't have to do this, but I don't want to scratch up my rear fender, so I am going to remove this docking hardware. You have 2 screws on each one, and they're T45. Now for the fender, you have 2 fender screws. You have one located right behind here. This is where you bolt on your saddlebag. You just pop this off with a flathead screwdriver. Just be careful not to chip any of your paint. Just slide that off and then your bolt is located behind there. And then you have another one right deep down in here. Now some sockets won't fit down in here, so you can use a T40 T-handle, or what I like to use are these stubby bits that I have, fits in these tight spaces. But like I said, you could also use a T40 T-handle. All right, so here you have that steel bracket that runs along here. You have 2 mounting locations for that steel bracket. You have 1 nut right here, and you have a nut on this side, and then you also have a screw on the other side. So I'm using a 1/2 inch socket and a T40 to remove those. Now that the rear fender is loosened up, you do have a nut right here. This is what your screw goes into, that goes through here. And then you also have one on the rear. I'll take a 3/4 inch wrench, or you can use a 3/4 inch socket to get this nut off. Just makes it a little easier to remove this rear fender. So you have a nut with a washer, and then this comes out the back side, just kind of locks it into there. Now I'm also going to loosen up this screw. You have another one on the other side in the same spot. Just going to loosen that up to kind of spread these out a little bit. Just gives it a little bit more wiggle room to get this rear fender out. So loosening up those 2 screws, you can kind of spread this apart. Gives you a little bit more wiggle room to get that out. Now if you have any wiring that's coming from your fender all the way to the front, you want to make sure you cut those zip ties, get all that off. That way you can easily just lift up your fender and take it off. Now that I have all my wires disconnected, I have all my screws removed, I can go ahead and guide this fender out. Just be careful on the sides. You don't want to scratch anything up. Just kind of roll it back and slide it out. So I went ahead and reassembled my stock rear fender. I reattached the fender extension. Like I said, you have 3 nuts on each side of the rear fender. That's how you're going to take this off. So this steel bracket right here is clamping down onto your fender extension. So taking this nut off or loosening it up is going to allow that bracket to come back a little bit so you can slide off your fender extension. Now I'll do some weight comparisons. Obviously this is ABS plastic, it's not steel. It's going to come in a lot lighter. I'll put this on here, making sure it doesn't scratch. Set that on there. And it's coming in at 2 pounds, 10.1 ounces. Now you might not have the latitude tail light from Zero 3D or the filler panel lights from Zero 3D, so your weight might be a little different, but this is exactly what I was rolling with. So I'll go ahead and throw this onto the scale to see how much that was. So it's coming in at 12 pounds, 13.2 ounces. Now, because I'm not using this wiring anymore, this is for the tri-bar. I'm gonna go ahead and follow this back, disconnect it. Now, also this antenna, I'm gonna relocate it to the fairing. Harley-Davidson does have a relocation kit for your street glides or your road glides. You can relocate this antenna to your fairing. You have some clips right here. Just push those clips out. They just pop right out. And then you can remove your wiring out of that. Now, I am gonna reuse these clips because I am gonna run some wiring through here for some other lights. So I'll leave these clips in once I get this wiring out. Now I'll loosen up this fuse box so I can get this wiring out, and I can also disconnect my antenna. You have 2 screws right here, and they're T40. So for the antenna, the disconnect is right here. You just have this tab. Just push down on that tab to disconnect it. Now that I have those wires out, I'll reattach my fuse panel. Now I'll remove this antenna bracket. This is where the light is gonna sit. So to take this antenna bracket out, I have this one screw right here, and it's a 3/16 hex bit. So a great opportunity to clean all this off, stuff that you can't see with your bags on or those lights on, get all that dirt, grime out of there. You can also inspect your wheel while the fender's off, just makes it a little easier. So here you have your stock seat retention nut. As you can see here, it has a raised notch. Obviously that's not gonna fit inside of here, but Nasty Hog does provide you with all new seat mounting hardware. So you have these 2 plastic washers or spacers. This is gonna help protect that paint. So it's gonna sit on here first, and then the other one is gonna go on the bottom. They do provide you with a new seat bolt if you don't have one, or if you're missing one, or you just want a new one. This screws into here. So I'll just get this, install it from the bottom, get this to sit inside of here. Now you can also use your seat bolt, take your seat bolt, use that as leverage, get that in there. You don't want this to stick out too much. You just want this to stick out just enough where you can get that bolt on the other side. Take that plastic washer, set that on there, and just kind of screw this down on this side. You want these 2 nuts pinching down on this plastic so it doesn't move around when you're tightening down your seat bolt. Right about there, nice and flush. So now just take this plastic washer, set that on there, take my other nut, secure this down. Now you can use an 11/16 or a 17mm, doesn't really matter. I'm gonna use an 11/16 wrench and also a 17mm. Now it doesn't need to be too tight, just get it down nice and snug. So I'll go ahead and test this out, make sure it doesn't turn while I'm tightening this down. So this doesn't turn when I tighten the seat bolt down, so we're good to go. So I do want to put this out there. If you guys have a specialized lock with this type of thread, this is a Robert Becker Designs seat lock. Now the thread on here does not work with the thread on here. So I do have to order another one in order for it to work with this type of thread on this seat retention nut. So you are going to reuse the stock mounting bosses. If you look at this retention nut right here, you have this notch. Just line that up with this one so it locks it into place. I'll stick my washer on there, take my nut, mount that on. Now the torque value for these mounting bosses on a stock rear fender is 15 to 20 foot-pounds. I wouldn't torque it down that much, just get these down nice and snug. Like I said, I'm not going to use this license plate, but if you are, this is very simple to mount on. This is ABS plastic, so you can drill right through this. I would get a level, make sure that this is level up and down. Go ahead and mark your holes, drill some pilot holes, then just make your holes big enough to fit your mounting hardware, and then you have it, you have your license plate holder. Now with most states, you do have to have an LED to illuminate that license plate while you're riding at night, but if you don't want to mount that LED and route that wiring, that's all on you. Now I'll get the new fender in. It should fit with these mounting bosses. This is a little bit smaller and it has more give than your steel fender. you can leave your seat bolt on there just to help you support it while you guide it in. Start off in the back and kind of squeeze your fender a little bit to get it to go in there. This plastic is a little bit more forgiving than your steel. You can work those in there, and then just grab onto your seat bolt and then just guide that around and towards the front. Nice and slow, you don't want to scratch that new paint. So now I'll get my screw started through these holes and into the mounting bosses and get this all mounted up. Now the torque value for a steel fender is 15 to 20 foot-pounds. We obviously do not want to torque it that high with a plastic fender, so I will just get them down nice and snug. Now, because I loosened up these support bracket strut screws, I'll go ahead and retighten them, and the torque value for these is 15 to 20 foot-pounds. Now I'll remount the 4-point docking hardware. Same thing, you have 2 screws, and don't forget your washer. Don't forget to remount your saddlebag clip nuts. Now, if you have this bracket right here, you can remove this. This is for your passenger. This is that oh crap handle that they grab onto for the stock seat. You have this screw right here, and I'm using a 3/8 socket. So I'll just stick this screw back in here. I might use it later for something. All right, so if you did option to purchase the rear lighting, it does come with a harness. This acts as a splitter, very simple, all plug and play. And then you have your connectors back here. You just plug those right in. So what I'm gonna do now is just run a test. I'll show you exactly how to connect this. That way we can test that lighting before we actually run our wires. Now, because I did get rid of the tri-bar, I got rid of all the rear lighting. I don't have anything plugged into here, but this black plug controls your rear lighting and this gray plug controls your fuel tank. So here you have your splitter, all plug and play. It only goes on one way. You can't put this one into here. So you have your connector right here, your 6-pin connector. You also have a locking tab. Some don't have this, but this one does have a locking tab. All you're gonna do is just push it into here, hear that click, and then just lock it down. Now, what's great about this splitter, if you wanna add some rear lighting, you can always plug it into right here, gives you another connection. Now, I do wish they had a plug or something if you're not using this, that way you can plug this up. Not a big deal. You can add some dielectric grease, that way your connections do not get corroded. Now, on the other end of your splitter, you do have this little mounting bracket right here. If you were looking for a spot to put this, you can just slide this bracket onto here. You might have this, you might not. Just slide that onto there just to get it out of the way. Now that I have that plugged in, here I have the other connectors. I'll go ahead and plug these in. You do have a left and a right. Your brown wire is gonna go to your right side and your gray wire is gonna go to your left side. Now with these lights, there's no left or right, just plug them into whatever wiring. Just when you run your wiring, you wanna make sure you run them to the correct spot. So here I have the gray wire, so it's the left side. These only go on one way, just slide them in till you hear it click. Here I have the brown wire, which is your right side. Slide that on till you hear it click. So lights look like they work. I'll go ahead and hit the left signal, which is the gray wire. Right signal. I'll go ahead and test the brakes. I'll test the hazards. Now, looking at this through your point of view on the camera, this might look like it's amber, but it's actually red, and this is flashing amber. Also, one important thing to check, which I've seen happen on other lights, is you do want to turn on your hazards, then turn off your bike, just to make sure that your hazards are still flashing. All right, now that I know these lights are good to go, I'll go ahead and run the wiring. Now, when you run your wiring, you can zip tie it along your fender strut or your support bracket. You just want to make sure it's not making contact with any moving parts. Now, you already have clips right here from your previous wiring, but if you don't, or you don't want to use these, you can zip tie it as well. Now, the brackets aren't marked with left or right, but they do have some instructions, and it shows that this end right here is going outboard. Now, the bracket is going to go on the back side. So you are gonna reuse that stock screw and nut from your fender bracket that you removed, and you're also gonna use this screw and nut right here. Now, in my opinion, you can take this nut and this screw and just flip it. That way you have the screw side on here. That way it's just a little bit cleaner. So for your saddlebag support bracket screw and nut, it's a T45 and a 9/16. Now for this bracket, when you go to tighten it down, make sure you tighten them down evenly, or just double check, make sure your bracket didn't shift. There is a little play in here, so when you go to tighten them down, just make sure your bracket is nice and straight. That way when you go to mount your light, it mounts correctly. Now for these screws, I would not torque them down to spec. I would just get them down nice and snug. You are tightening down on plastic now, and you don't want that to crack. So you just run your wiring right through the bracket to reach the light, and then you would just make sure that it connects before you tighten all your zip ties down. Now, when you go to mount your light, obviously you just want to find the shape of your light right here. So going to mount the light, it only goes on one way. Click that in, make sure it's connected. Now you can push your wiring back out through the bracket if you want. Now you can take some of this excess wiring, just zip tight here. You only have so much room between the mounting bracket and your light. So on the back of the light, you do have your mounting locations right here. You do have 4 self-tapping screws provided in the kit. You use those to secure these down. So it's gonna be the same thing on the other side.